There's been a lot of discussions on dungeons and whether Tears of the Kingdom will introduce them back into the series. And what's crazy is that dungeons are so iconic to the Zelda franchise that the lack of said dungeons has divided the fans as to whether Breath of the Wild is a true Zelda game. Now, the thing is, I'm a huge Legend of Zelda fan, so it's hard for me to admit that the earlier game dungeons, whilst they had great themes and looked amazing, were not always the best. And yeah, most of them were quite predictable, and to be honest, this isn't necessarily a bad thing. You would enter a dungeon with a clear obstruction, and halfway through, find an item to bypass these obstacles. But the thing is, it happened in every dungeon and every game. It's been said before, but the original Legend of Zelda, which was the inspiration for Breath of the Wild, worked a little differently and had dungeons that you could beat with an item you found a few dungeons ago, and sometimes you didn't even need an item. So why did they get rid of this in Breath of the Wild? In Breath of the Wild, there are no dungeons but the Divine Beasts, which I know get a bad rap, but I actually quite like them. They were new, they slowed the pace of the exploration, and they just kind of generally felt new. But that being said, they weren't the best idea. I always had the thought that the Divine Beasts could have been the bosses themselves to 4 main dungeons. The themes actually feel quite reminiscent of previous Zelda titles. And I think this is where Breath of the Wild really missed the mark when it comes to dungeons, because it's the perfect game to have them. The dungeons in past games were atmospheric, and to me that's what made them so appealing. They looked brilliant, they were fun to be in. Well, mostly. In Breath of the Wild, the Divine Beasts are almost identical to each other. I understand with the shrines the need for identical interiors because, well, there's bloody hundreds of those bad boys. So while the Divine Beasts are pretty bland, it's the puzzles which I enjoyed. And I think the original dungeons lacked this type of variety in their puzzles. There were a few dungeons that had puzzles, but nothing that really made you think. They were more frustrating than anything else. Now imagine the mechanics of Breath of the Wild combined with the dungeons of old. Oh my god, it's beautiful. The one major difference would be the items. I mean, technically Breath of the Wild has items, if you consider the Sheikah Slate abilities items, but these could easily translate into dungeon items, or I actually still like the idea of having to unlock these abilities at the beginning of the game, like how it's done already, and then traversing each dungeon with your entire arsenal, making for a way more challenging and diverse experience. The combination between abilities could create a wide variety of puzzles for each dungeon. There could still be mini-bosses, but instead of getting progression items from them, how about a new unbreakable weapon or something of the like? Which brings me onto the dungeon boss. What more do I have to say? Having the Divine Beast as a boss is already kind of a thing. Before you can even enter any of them, you kind of have to battle them, so it makes me wonder whether this was an initial idea in the early stages of Breath of the Wild. So, Tears of the Kingdom. Where do we stand on this one? I have a feeling that we won't have dungeons in the traditional sense, but I think it's going to go like this. There will be 3 main areas: the sky, the underground, and the surface. Now bear with me, I have a few thoughts on this, but the surface will act as a sort of hub area, connecting the sky and the underworld. And these spirals of light give us access to the sky, and these cave entrances will be our gateway to the underworld. And I think each area in effect will be its own kind of dungeon, just really big. The Sky Islands will contain trials and bosses which you will have to overcome. Once you've completed these trials, you will gain new abilities for Link's new arm. This scene here is reminiscent of Mega Man or Metroid Prime, where you gain new abilities. This, in turn, will give Link the ability to progress further through the Sky Islands, which reminds me of the Wind Waker Islands, where some of them contain obstacles you can't get past until you've unlocked certain abilities. My hope is that actually we will be using Princess Zelda in the underground sections. As we can see here, she has some form of Sheikah Slate pointed out by Nintendo, and she will be able to use this to traverse the underground and aid Link in unlocking his abilities. I'm not saying that the surface won't have its fair share of story and battles, but I think for the most part, the sky and underground will be the places that we find our skills and abilities. The thing is, I miss having dungeons. That's why I'm hoping Tears of the Kingdom will reintroduce them. With the type of puzzle solving that the Sheikah Shrines gave us, it would be so good. Anyway, thank you for watching. I actually really love the Zelda series and would love to keep making this type of content and videos, so if you enjoyed, let me know, and yeah, I'll catch you on the next one. Thank you very much.